As I was growing up, there was 7 children in our family, so we pretty much ate a lot of food that was made to serve a bunch of people, like meat with gravy and hamburger meat with gravy. We had a lot of soups. We ate a lot of beans. We ate tortillas, and we had homemade bread. And our mother would bake some good pies and cakes. So we ate a whole lot of different kinds of food, but mostly foods that would stretch a whole lot and feed a big family, not anything that was real small. Like I said, we had chicken. She'd make it to where she would mix it with either a spaghetti type thing to make it feed a bunch of people. My favorite dish to make when I was learning how to cook, I believe, was fideo. I used to like to cook fideo because it's really easy to cook, and you can make it so many different ways. You can put so many different things in it, and it's very tasty, and I really enjoyed making it, and I really enjoyed eating it too. My favorite meal to cook is caldo, which is a beef soup. And the reason I like to cook that is because I can get real creative as to the spices I can put in. And it's got all the vegetables. It's got cabbage, it's got carrots, it's got zucchini, squash, corn. You can just put just about anything you want to in that soup and make it taste good. And I usually like to use the beef short ribs because that makes them real tender, and it just gives the soup this real nice broth, and it's just delicious, and I just love to cook caldo. I usually cook from family tradition. If I use a recipe, it's because I'll find a recipe that I think looks interesting and might be good, and then I will use a recipe. But most of my cooking is from family tradition, and I don't measure anything. I just kind of put handfuls here, handfuls there, or like taste it to make sure it's got enough, or just from the smell, the aroma of the food as it's cooking, I'll know if it's got the right amount of spices, and if I taste it also. But most of my cooking is from family tradition. I cook them, maybe once every 6 months. I usually don't cook them a whole lot because it's just my husband and I, and my husband doesn't like to overeat too much at night, and so they can be a little heavy. So he usually likes more soups and stews, and so I cook more of that than anything else. And usually I'll fix the enchiladas when I have other people over, that you can feed a bunch of people with, and because you can make a whole lot of them, and it's good, for when you have company over. And that dish is Mexican rice. Okay, Mexican rice is very difficult to cook. Okay, because it has to cook a certain way. The rice has to flour, turn into a little flour when you're cooking it, and sometimes it's very difficult to learn how much liquid to put in it, because you cannot put too much liquid because then it'll get real clumpy on you. And I just have not been able to figure out how people cook this delicious Mexican rice. I've had some Mexican rice that is just outstanding, and I wish I knew how to cook it. And I've tried and tried, but I just cannot get that rice to flour the way that it's supposed to. And that's the truth. Okay, my enchiladas I prepare is first I cook the meat and spice it up and make the gravy into the meat, and then I shred the cheese, and then I prepare the tortillas, the corn tortillas. You kind of just warm them up in oil and make them soft so that you can roll them up. And then I just fill them with the meat and the cheese, roll them up, seam down, put them in a baking dish, put the rest of the meat and gravy on them and the rest of the cheese, and make them real nice and cheesy. Pop them in the oven and let the cheese melt, and they're ready.
What spices do you use?
I use garlic, I use comino, I use chili powder. And then what I do is I like to mix my fresh garlic and fresh comino, and I like to grind that in what you call a molcajete. Okay, and then I supplement it with dry garlic powder and comino powder and chili powder, which gives it a little more flavor, because then the spices are more concentrated that way, because I'm doubling up on the spices and making them come together and kind of just make everything taste better. I learned how to cook my enchiladas from my mother. I never had a recipe of enchiladas. It was just from watching how she made them, and that's how she made them. She made them with the gravy and the meat mixed together, and she would roll them, fill them with meat and then the cheese and then the onions, and roll them up and top them with meat and cheese. I never have used a recipe for enchiladas. I know that there's probably plenty of recipes out there for making enchiladas, but I don't mind it. Mine is probably a different type of enchilada that somebody might come and say, they'd come and eat some and they'd say, well, this isn't what I'm used to, what enchiladas look like. And of course not, because they were handed down from family to family, and not everybody makes them exactly the same way. You talk to somebody about enchiladas and how they make their enchiladas, you're going to get all these different versions, because a lot of people, especially in your Mexican culture, have learned how to cook enchiladas from family to family, generation from generation to generation, and everybody makes them different. When I was going to high school, I was taking a homemaking class in high school, and they had taught us how to make popovers in class. And I wanted to impress my mom and dad by making them at home. So I went ahead and started to make them the way the recipe said they were supposed to be made. And they're supposed to blow up like a little balloon when you make them. Okay, so I made mine and got them in the oven. I pulled them out of the oven, but they never made that little air balloon. They just plopped and fell flat. And oh, I was so embarrassed, because I was trying to impress my mom and dad, and I wasn't able to.
Did you figure out what you did wrong?
No, I never was able to figure out what I did wrong. It must have been something in how I mix things, because you have to mix it a certain way, and I probably either undermixed it or overmixed it, and that made the difference. I can always tell when I have cooked, because when I cook, sometimes I tend to burn myself, and I know that, and it's not a real bad burn, it's just maybe I touch a hot pan, or when I'm pulling something out of the oven, I actually accidentally touch the top of the oven with my hand or something. And so that is kind of my sign or my symbol of the fact that, like my badge or something that says, okay, I've been cooking and I've cooked up a storm today, so here's my badge to show that I've been cooking today, and I've got this little bitty burn or something on there, or this little bitty cut or something, and that's kind of like my saying, okay, I cooked.